My husband comes from a lineage that owns a prominent restaurant group chain. For my mother-in-law, who has a son predestined to be the successor, such status is her pride and joy. In contrast, I, raised solely by my father, seem to be a stain on their esteemed family heritage. A daughter-in-law from a less prominent background and a lower status than her husband is deemed insignificant, deserving of neglect. However, when my design was selected for the menu of a restaurant managed by my father-in-law, the dynamics shifted. My mother-in-law had dabbled in design but failed to pass even the preliminary round. It was just a scribble, a worthless attempt, she would say in self-consolation, bitter that her amateur work was being compared to that of a professional designer. From then on, her demeanor changed from indifference to outright malice. Visiting the separate house where my husband Kyle and I resided, she would voice her sarcasm and petty complaints. "Sally, look at the dust behind the TV. It's not clean at all. What kind of upbringing allows you to be satisfied with such cleaning?" She would arrive and immediately start nitpicking, voicing her grievances loudly. "That was my doing," Kyle would respond, visibly deflated. With him working from home and being actively involved in household chores, it naturally led to him shouldering a significant part of the housework. His response was a perfect boomerang to her criticism, but she redirected the blame. "Sally, are you making your husband do the chores again? What kind of wife are you? Prioritizing work over household duties." I never slacked off, neither at work or at home. No matter if Kyle tried to interject, she wouldn't stop until I apologized. "I'm so sorry. I'll try harder." Satisfied with my submission, she would smirk triumphantly and depart. After each of her visits, Kyle would sigh, weary of her attitude. "I'm sorry. I'll do better with the chores," I would say. "No, it's clearly mother's spite. Sorry for letting you down," he would reply, always supportive yet unable to influence his mother's behavior. Even when he consulted with his father, there seemed to be no change in her, likely due to his busy schedule, forgetting to admonish his wife. "Well," I thought, "it's only a matter of enduring her unpleasantness. In time, she would soften, or so I believe." But I never imagined she would stoop to such lows. Kyle's cousin got engaged, and a celebration was arranged. It was to be a grand affair, inviting not only relatives but also business associates, in a luxurious hotel hall capable of accommodating 70 people. The day after Kyle informed me, his mother called. "Celebrations are traditional affairs. Some dishes we will entrust to the venue, but the main courses will be prepared by family members. We've assigned responsibilities for each type. So, Sally, I heard you bragging about your cooking skills before, right?" Her tone was laced with sarcasm, but indeed, I had mentioned my proficiency, having assisted my father in the kitchen since childhood. "If it turns out awful, you'll just embarrass yourself later. Anyway, you'll be in charge of the French cuisine," she decided, cutting off the call before I could respond. Resigned to her usual antics, I realigned my work schedule and began planning the menu. Everything proceeded smoothly until the day of the celebration. Then, at 11:30 in the morning, my mother-in-law called. The event was set to start at 1 in the afternoon. So as the overseeing coordinator, she should have been busy with the final checks at the venue, right? Puzzled, I answered the call. "Oh, Sally, I checked your cooking, and it's atrocious." I was so shocked, I threw it all out, caught off guard by her abrupt and shrill monologue. I could only mutter, I was in the middle of rushing a sudden job to finish in time for the celebration. Shocked into silence. "I see. There's no time left. We start at 1. Get it remade immediately." Confusion set in. Did she not know I had switched responsibilities for today? As this realization dawned on me, a dreadful thought arose. "Calm down, Sally. What exactly did my mother-in-law just say? You threw out all the food?" Actually, a few days after I was assigned to handle the French cuisine, due to circumstances, I swapped roles with the invitation distribution coordinator. Since I was no longer in charge of cooking, I didn't give it a second thought, especially since the overseeing mother-in-law had said she would contact me. Please listen carefully. I'm at the office right now. Have been since this morning. Since I was relieved from cooking duties, I've been working during the freed-up time." I explained slowly as if making her understand. Then she muttered, "Then whose cooking is this?" Followed by an audible gasp. "What are we going to do? There's only an hour left until the start. This is your responsibility. You didn't report it. That's right. You need to fix this. Otherwise, I'll say you threw it out." In her panic, she seemed not to understand herself, ranting nonsensically. But I didn't want to be falsely accused of discarding the food. Reluctantly, I apologized to the office and rushed to the venue. I narrowly missed a train and arrived slightly past 12. I had explained the situation to Kyle via text. So as soon as he saw me, he rushed over, his face pale. I found the food in the waiting room, but the French cuisine was missing, causing a stir. And in the kitchen, the sink was clogged with food. Who could do such a terrible thing? It felt like a crime scene. An air of tension was palpable. Mother-in-law had proclaimed loudly, "Sally threw it out. Her absence is proof enough." According to Kyle. Suppressing a headache, I said, "I'm going to the kitchen," and at the same time, entrusted Kyle with a request. Arriving at the kitchen, mother-in-law spotted me and screamed, "Sally, what have you done?" Around her were Kyle's aunts, his newly engaged cousin, and fiancée Emmy, along with other relatives drawn by the commotion. They all turned their accusatory gaze on me, but I calmly corrected them. I did not throw away the food. Mother-in-law immediately retorted, "Don't play dumb, ruining such a celebratory occasion. You ungrateful, you're a disgrace to this family. I was working this morning when you called to accuse me of disposing of the food." I replied, "What an outrageous accusation. Not only do you look down on me, but you're also framing me for such a vile act." She played the tragic heroine, appealing vividly to those around her. Unfortunately, the relatives trusted mother-in-law more than me, a newcomer. I felt their condemning stares intensify. Then, shall I have the office confirm that I was working this morning? If we do that, eventually the truth would come out, and mother-in-law's lies would be exposed. I was ready for a full-on battle when, "That won't be necessary." Sally was in charge of an assignment I gave her. It was a sudden job, but she accepted it willingly, said a voice unexpectedly. It was father-in-law, with Kyle standing relieved behind him. Despite fearing he might refuse due to his busy schedule, father-in-law had successfully completed the task, showing the trust placed in the prospective head of the main family. The atmosphere shifted. The glances towards me turned awkward, and suspicion began to gather on mother-in-law and Sally about that call earlier. Mother-in-law claimed she tasted the food, found it terrible, and threw it all away. She instructed me over the phone to remake it, I testified. The murmurs around us grew louder. Then suddenly, a weeping sound echoed. It was Emmy, the fiancée of Kyle's cousin. I mostly cook Italian dishes, but I worked hard on the French cuisine too, and it turned out delicious. She cried out in choppy sobs, clinging to her fiancé. Indeed, she was the one who had swapped responsibilities with me, the main character of today's event. She had confided in me about her secret plan to surprise everyone with her cooking, and I had agreed to help. That Emmy's cooking is bad. Are you implying that my own palate, which approved her for our Italian restaurant, is flawed? Father-in-law challenged. No. It's not what I meant. Mother-in-law's desperate cries were too late. Emmy was a chef at father-in-law's establishment, a professional, with his endorsement. Because all you ever spout is sarcasm towards your daughter-in-law, your taste must have gone sour. Father-in-law remarked with a mix of irony and a sigh. Mother-in-law was desperately apologizing to him, but I couldn't hold back any longer. Excuse me, aren't you apologizing to the wrong person? Even if Emmy's cooking was bad, throwing it away is the lowest of the low. As I spoke up, mother-in-law's expression turned to anger, and she grabbed my collar. I thought it was your cooking. I thought I was being kind to throw away such a vile and tasteless meal made by someone like you, a woman from a broken home. If I knew it was someone else's, I would never have thrown it away. It's your fault. You set this up. Spittle flying, she ranted at me. Amidst her disgraceful outburst, it was my husband's aunt who raised her voice. Knowing that I'm divorced, do you really think being from a broken home is disgraceful? I heard our late grandmother also lost her mother at a young age. By that logic, our family seems to be full of disgraceful people. Her gaze was as cold as if she were looking at vermin. No, that's not it. I didn't know. It doesn't matter. We all see your true colors now. Mother-in-law trembled, then collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor. What a commotion! Came a sudden voice, and I turned to see an elderly man in a wheelchair. It was my husband's grandfather, the current head of the main family. I heard such a loud fuss. I'm not clear on the details, but throwing away food is unacceptable, the current head said, nodding in agreement. When my grandmother was evacuated during the war, she was given some sweet potatoes from a field. The sweetness momentarily took away the pain of losing her mother, he said, and the room fell silent. Food carries the emotions of those involved. She was saved by the kindness of the one who prepared it. Disrespecting food is beneath human decency. We don't have such people in our family, do we? He directed the question at father-in-law. Of course not, he replied, satisfying the head of the family, who then left the scene. His word was absolute. At the very least, everyone saw the divorced father-in-law decided upon for mother-in-law as the appropriate course of action. Mother-in-law, who had always prided herself on being the wife of the next head of the main house, understood the weight of his authority better than anyone, realizing that no matter what she argued, it could not be overturned. She had to apologize to all the relatives, including the branch families, for the disruption at the celebration, and particularly for her blasphemy against food as part of a family involved in the food industry. She was reportedly kneeling and weeping. The property settlement was concluded by deducting the damages for ruining the celebration from mother-in-law's share, leaving her with a meager preparation fund. Cast out from the main house, she ended up in a small apartment meant for a single person, shunned by all relatives, leading a lonely life with no one to turn to. She never would have imagined that her petty jealousy and bullying, which led to her discarding the food, would result in her own downfall. She had committed an act that should never be done by a person, and she had to pay for what she did.